I mean, you always have to be thinking, how are these guys going to spin this to their advantage? And, you know, it always has a play somehow.
Let's get into the big story. So BlackRock, Deutsche Bank, Schwab, Valkyrie, we just saw earlier today, Citadel, Fidelity, other big names. We've got that. That was only like 6 or 7. We've got at least 10 that have applied.
I saw Wisdom Tree was another one. I'm not familiar with them, but I saw someone said that was a bigger name. I don't know who Wisdom Tree is, but
I think we've got some European banks maybe in on this too that we're not as familiar with. But yeah, BlackRock, clearly that was the first one and a huge one. Fidelity, obviously, everybody knows about. They actually have had Bitcoin mining going on for years now. I mean, actually a couple of cycles. But so let's just lay this out. Now, credit to you, Ewok. I don't remember I guess it was last week's show, maybe the week before, but you're not going to say the C word, but your theory, which you're probably dead on about, was that Gary Gensler, Mr. Burns, the SEC, was basically preparatory suing everybody in the crypto space, the actual crypto exchanges, to basically pave the way for these legacy financial institutions to start getting involved. Nobody's even trying to hide this at this point. So Coinbase gets sued last week. Binance, a much more serious suit. Coinbase, not so much. Sued by the SEC. And literally within a week, we see all of these institutions apply for a spot Bitcoin ETF. And if you don't know what that means for whatever reason, you know, we've had other stuff in the past like Bitcoin Grayscale, which is more of like a fund. It's a derivative or a futures. It's not really a spot ETF. We have not had that in this space yet. And it's always been looked at as a big thing. Like by the time we get a spot ETF, that's going to be when, you know, grandma and grandpa actually have, you know, 10% of their retirement fund in some Bitcoin ETF. So that's what these institutions are applying for. What's so crazy about it is BlackRock's, for example, and I'm sure some of these other ones, this ETF was backed and supported by Coinbase, who is, again, currently being sued by the SEC. So first off, go ahead.
Well, Coinbase was supposed to be the custodian for the holding. So that's what I found the most interesting about all of this is that BlackRock applies for this and they want then Coinbase to custody it. Meanwhile, they're being sued by the SEC.
Right.
It just does not adding up, man. It doesn't make sense. How can you have somebody and maybe it's to get them out of that market with the you know, the unregistered securities that they say that they're selling. So that it can open up the doors for more of this from legacy finance. So, you know, sorry, I cut you off there, but you know, that's the funny part to me is the custodianship from Coinbase. Meanwhile, they're being sued. It doesn't add up. Something's still not right.
Well, here's what I wonder, because, you know, we've been saying, like, is Gary Gensler, you know, in bed with these institutions, and he was kind of just the guy to go out and sue the crypto exchanges to get this to happen? Or are these institutions not exactly aligned with Gensler and there's no real support there? And, you know, he's just kind of acting rogue and they're then just taking advantage of it on the back end. I mean, like, it smells too fishy for them to not all be working together.
Right.
But as far as Gensler goes, I mean, you still got to think that he's on the hot seat. I mean, I think he might just be the fall guy in all of this by the time it's all said and done. I mean, them being in cahoots just makes way too much sense. It's just all of this is just way too soon, way too convenient to not be that way. So what do you make of it? And what do you think happens to Gensler when the dust settles here? Because nobody really likes him. So,
well, I'm hoping he loses his job before the dust even settles. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these ETFs don't get approved. You know, I don't be shocked if only 2 or 3 of them, you know, the big names, the BlackRocks, the Schwab, Deutsche Bank will probably be another one because they're, you know, overseas.
Yeah.
But again, don't be surprised if only 3 or 4 of them get approved, all the other ones could possibly get denied because, like you said, there's been other attempts at it, but not a spot BTC ETF like this. So it is new. Again, that was kind of part of my question is how well will it work out if they're actually buying and holding actual Bitcoin rather than just a derivative. So it's going to be interesting, man. Like I said, I don't know how it's going to play out. But with these people getting involved, odds are there's something shady going on, just like everything else, right?
Well, it was clearly paved for BlackRock. I mean, they were the first one in. I mean, I think we all think this. I mean, everybody I've read talk about it has been in the works for probably a while now, like for the better part of a year or two, that BlackRock was going to be the one to get it. I mean, they already own everything anyway. So yeah, clearly they will get approved. Maybe Schwab, Fidelity, Deutsche, that all would make sense. What I'm wondering, so you were talking about like which ones will be approved and which ones not. So typically this does take 250 days or so for these to get approved. Those ones are going to get approved. Like at least a couple of these prominent ones, like you said, Ewok, are definitely going to get approved. And that time frame of 250 days or whatever it is, which I think is about the average that this does happen, would put us, we were talking a bit ago, at the Bitcoin halving there in April, basically, of next year. So that creates an awful interesting scenario where we have the Bitcoin halving. Now, when the halving occurs, if you're not, the viewers aren't familiar with like past cycles, usually up to about a year after that is when you start to see the bull market really, really pop off. It's not instantaneous, but something like this, which again will be a sell the news event. I'm just wondering, I mean, what kind of, I know we're future casting here, and that's kind of dangerous to do, but looking in April of next year, which is an eternity in crypto. I mean, we just saw how much shit just happened in a week. So think about, 10 months.
Right.
But would it make sense to you, Ewok, that, we're seeing the announcement of some of these ETFs getting approved, the halving occurs, which will probably be a sell the news event within itself. And we get maybe some major pumpage next spring for like a dump after the halving. That seems like how this could play out to me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, usually the halving is a dumpening event, at least for a little while right after that, because it is a sell the news event. It kind of is going to depend on how all this falls into place, I guess, with everything else, the timing of it, the timing of the halving. Is it going to be before or is it going to be after? I think that'll really matter a lot, depending. So if it happens before and then the happenings, I think you're going to see a real drastic dump. If it happens afterwards, it may not be as severe, only because people are kind of preparing for this ETF. So going to be interesting. Again, it's an eternity away. So many things could happen in the meantime. But yeah, it's going to definitely make for an interesting spring, one way or another, as far as Bitcoin goes. And everything else kind of follows. The markets definitely are correlated with it. So we'll be waiting anxiously to see how it plays out.
We definitely will. And then this was all followed up today. Again, things just turning up roses for Bitcoin and crypto, allegedly, this week. So now today, Jerome Powell spoke. Jerome Powell, obviously the head of the Fed. Every month he basically tells us if we're allowed to spend money or not again, and where inflation is going and stuff like that. So he was being interviewed today and literally said that he was kind of directly grilled about crypto and said that he thinks it has the staying power as an asset class, which was interesting to see. And again, this is kind of him directly going against Gary Gensler. I mean, like he's just sounding a lot different and providing, not that he's the SEC guy, but providing more clarity on how they feel about it than Gensler. He also mentioned that he sees stable coins as a form of money. I'm not entirely sure what that sentence means to him, but those are two things that he said. So what are kind of your takeaways of this? Because all of this happening this week, all we see on TV are all these old guys that are in charge of government entities that we didn't elect, making decisions nobody really supports. So,
Right.
it's like we're seeing the ETF stuff, we're seeing the stuff that Powell is saying, we're seeing stuff the Fed is saying versus the stuff the SEC is saying. It just seems like these powers that be are pushing for crypto adoption their way, as you've said, to get their piece of the pie. And, if Gensler again needs to be the fall guy, then so be it. But what do you make of these Powell comments?
So I read more into actually what Powell said, and he said, I do view stable coins as money, and here's why. He said because the central banks are in control of creating the belief. It's funny how he worded it. Creating the belief of the value of money, and because stable coins are pegged to the dollar, they're also and backed by dollars, they're also kind of tied in. He made it really weird how he said it. But just the fact that he said central banks are kind of responsible for the belief in money, that it has value. That was his in not so many words. He's like, this is this paper stuff. We're the ones that are responsible for making you think it's got value.
Yeah.
So, and therefore, because the stable coins are pegged to that thing, they're also valuable. And it was almost like they were trying to gain responsibility for allowing that stable coins to have value. It was kind of weird the way I took it. And then I'm thinking, oh, wait, maybe this is his play into CBDCs. Here we go again, where these stable coins are money. Here, we're going to define them as money. So when our stable coin comes out, you're not going to be surprised that they're also viewed as money and interchangeable just the same way. So that was my take on the whole thing and how they possibly will spin it. I mean, you always have to be thinking, how are these guys going to spin this to their advantage? And, it always has a play somehow.
Well, as long as we can bridge Fed now over to Pulse Chain and trade it for, whatever we want to buy, I'm fine. I'm fine with that.